There's a certain rhythm to a quiet life, morning coffee at the same chipped corner of the kitchen table, the soft hum of a ceiling fan, the weight of habit in every chore. That night, like most others, I was wrapping up the day the same way I always did, hauling out the trash. One hand on the bin lid, the other already fumbling for the back door. I remember it clearly, not because it was remarkable, but because of what came right after. As I passed the counter, Brianna's phone lit up. It buzzed once. I wasn't even looking for anything. My eyes just caught the screen. There it was, a message from Chris, work, followed by a photo notification. That name, Chris, meant nothing to me at first. Could have been anyone. Until I saw the preview. I froze. There she was. My wife in lingerie. Reclining across a bed I didn't recognize, the sheets some kind of dark red. She looked posed, styled even, and not alone. A man's bare torso was in frame, his head cropped out but close enough to hers that their bodies nearly touched. There was an asterisk Macy in the angle. Too much. My gut tightened like I'd swallowed a bolt. It wasn't just the image, it was the context. This wasn't something you accidentally send to your coworker. This wasn't something you explained away with, it's for a project. Not unless the project had a rating and a subscription service. I didn't mean to see it. I hadn't even picked up the phone. But there it was, plain as day. She walked in moments later, a shopping bag slung on her arm and the scent of her new perfume trailing behind her. It was one of those crisp, floral fragrances she'd only started wearing recently, expensive stuff. She caught me looking at the phone. And in that split second, I braced for something: shock, anger, a scramble to hide the screen. But she didn't panic. "Oh, that," she said casually, setting the bag down. "It's for a thing at work. Chris is helping out with this project for a friend, some kind of photography exhibit. It's all performance-based." She offered a half smile, her voice smooth, almost rehearsed. "You know how these creative types are." I nodded, silent. The strangest thing? She looked me right in the eye. No stutter, no guilt. She didn't try to grab the phone or cover it up. Just stood there, spinning her little story as if she'd prepared for this moment. That part stuck with me more than the image itself. That's when I knew. It wasn't the photo that broke something in me. It was her delivery. Calm. Controlled. Like she'd been expecting a moment like this. Like she'd practiced for it. I said nothing. What could I say? I walked past her, opened the back door, and tossed the trash into the bin. My hands were trembling. The air outside was thick with the smell of distant rain, and I just stood there for a while, staring out at the yard we'd once landscaped together. It used to feel like home. Tonight, it felt like a movie set, a place built for appearances. Inside, Brianna hummed to herself as she unpacked groceries, like nothing had happened. She didn't ask if I believed her. She didn't press. She just kept moving. That was the tell. When someone's clean, they want to talk, explain, cry even. But when they're guilty, they act normal. Like nothing's wrong. Like it's just another Tuesday. Later that evening, I sat on the couch with the TV on, not really watching. She joined me, curled up with her tablet, scrolling through Instagram like the world was right side up. I kept my eyes on the screen, but my mind wasn't there. It was running backward through time, flashing through 100 little moments that now looked different under this new light. There was the business trip she took to Austin last month, left on a Thursday, came back Monday. Said the flights were cheaper that way. There was the new gym membership she signed up for across town, even though we had one closer to home. The extra effort she put into her makeup, the way she'd started keeping her phone face down, always locked with a passcode she never used to bother with. I'd noticed these things, sure, but I brushed them off. Because that's what you do when you love someone. You trust. You assume the best. You give them the benefit of the doubt again and again until one day the doubt refuses to be ignored. And that day had arrived. I stayed up late that night, way later than usual. Not because I was stewing or trying to catch her in another lie. I just couldn't sleep. My brain wouldn't shut off. It kept playing that moment on a loop, the message notification, her face when she saw me looking, the chill in her explanation. Something inside me had shifted. Not an explosion, not even anger. Just a deep, slow realization that whatever we had was no longer what I thought it was. She went to bed before me, kissed my cheek like always. But even her kiss felt different. Empty. Like a routine she was tired of but didn't know how to stop. I sat there long after the house went dark, listening to the creaks in the walls, the ticking of the clock. Every sound felt louder now, every shadow longer. That night, I didn't make a decision. I didn't storm into the bedroom demanding answers. I didn't call Chris's number or dig through her phone. I just sat with the weight of that image burned into my mind, and something else, something worse. The knowing. I didn't have proof. Not yet. But I had instinct. and for the first time in my life I chose to trust it more than her. Sleep didn't come easy after that night. I laid in bed next to Brianna, listening to her breathe, watching the ceiling fade from gray to black in the dark. My thoughts circled like vultures. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that photo again. The angle, the curve of her pose, the anonymous hand beside her. I told myself I was overreacting, that people made art in strange ways, that maybe she was telling the truth. But the truth wasn't in her words. It was in her eyes. And once you start questioning the person you sleep beside, it's impossible to stop. The next morning, I pretended everything was normal. I made her coffee the way I always did, 2 sugars, splash of oat milk, just how she liked it. She kissed my cheek, thanked me, and went off to get ready. I watched her from the kitchen doorway, her silhouette moving through the steam in the bathroom mirror. A routine like choreography. Except now I saw it differently. Like I was backstage watching a performance instead of living real life. While she blow-dried her hair, my mind drifted to all the little things I'd ignored. The missed calls at dinner. The sudden urge to hit the gym 5 days a week, even though she used to loathe exercise. Her texts getting shorter, her laughter more hollow. The late-night Zoom calls for team coordination. I remembered asking once, "You guys work different time zones now?" She brushed it off. Said Chris was based in Seattle. I didn't even know if that was true. What stood out now wasn't just the changes, but how I'd let them slide. I chalked it up to stress, to career ambition. Brianna had always been driven. I loved that about her. I admired how she held a room, how she spoke her mind. But somewhere along the line, her ambition turned into distance. And then there were the trips. She started traveling more about 8 months ago. At first, it made sense. Her company had expanded, and she was up for a new regional role. But the destinations felt odd. Austin, Denver, Detroit. Always a city she claimed had partner branches or leadership forums. She'd return exhausted, but oddly upbeat. Like the time she brought back an executive gift basket from a conference in Tampa, except I later saw the same basket featured on a Nashville boutique's Instagram page. I told myself it was a chain, that there were plenty of upscale hotels offering the same things. But the nagging feeling never went away. Even her style changed. Not dramatically, but enough. She swapped flats for heels, denim for sleek dresses. Bought a new line of skincare she claimed a colleague recommended. And the perfume, God, the perfume. The first time I smelled it was after a trip to Chicago. I told her it was nice. She laughed, said Chris picked it out as a team-building joke. "He has good taste," she added. The comment felt off then. Now it echoed like a confession. She stopped saying my name. That realization hit me like a gut punch. She used to say, "Trevor," when she called from the car or texted about dinner. Lately it was just "Hey" or "Can you?" Like I was her assistant, not her husband. She used to smile when she saw me walk through the door. Now she barely looked up. And when she did, there was a delay in her eyes. Like her brain had to reset to remember who I was. The biggest red flag, though? Her wedding ring. She started taking it off. At first, it was during workouts or work functions. "Doesn't match the outfit," she joked once. But one morning I found it in her purse, loose in a side pocket with some old gum wrappers. That ring meant something to me. I spent 3 months saving for it back in the day, working overtime shifts fixing bikes in a sweaty garage. I had proposed to her on the overlook where we used to watch the 4th of July fireworks. She cried, said it was perfect. Now it rode around with lint and receipts. That night, lying in bed next to her, I thought about our first apartment. A shoebox with mismatched plates and a leaky sink. We used to dance in that kitchen, barefoot on cold tile, laughing over burnt pasta and Spotify ads. We were broke, but we were real. Lately, it felt like we were playing house. Like 2 actors reciting lines in a play that had long since lost its audience. I started noticing more. She kept a second phone charger in her purse. Said it was for convenience. But why did she keep checking her phone in the bathroom with the fan on? She used to fall asleep watching documentaries with me. Now she stayed up late reading on her tablet, screen turned away, face unreadable. One night I got curious and checked her browsing history on the shared laptop. Nothing too suspicious, just a few articles about navigating workplace boundaries and best cities for digital entrepreneurs. But then I saw a few hotel booking pages, places she never mentioned visiting. When I brought it up casually the next day, she shrugged it off. Just research for an event I might be organizing, she said. Her tone was tired, dismissive. I think that's when I stopped asking questions. Not because I didn't want answers, but because I already knew them. It wasn't just the photo. It was everything that led up to it, like puzzle pieces scattered across the floor. I'd been staring at the mess for months, pretending it didn't mean anything. But that image, her in that bed next to someone else, it was the box top. The picture that made all the pieces snap into place. I hadn't confronted her yet. I didn't even know if I wanted to. What was the point? She'd deny it. Or worse. She'd confirm it, and I'd have to face the finality of it all. I wasn't ready. Not yet. So I did what I always do when my head gets noisy. I went to work. Most folks know me as a bicycle repairman. And that's not a lie, not exactly. I do own the shop. Fix bikes, talk to customers, crack jokes with kids bringing in rusted 10-speeds. But it's a front. A slice of who I am. The truth is, I built something bigger, quietly in the background over years. A co-working network that grew from a single leased floor above my bike shop into a national enterprise. Nobody knew it was mine. Not even Brianna. I built it under a separate name, a separate life. Maybe because I always feared something like this. There's a comfort in having a secret no one can take from you. That week, I buried myself in spreadsheets, talked to managers, checked expansion reports. But even in the distraction of success, I couldn't shake her voice, her scent, her practiced calm. Every time my phone buzzed, I hoped it was her, with an apology, a confession, anything. But she went on as if nothing happened. Sent texts about grocery lists and dry cleaning, like the truth wasn't rotting in the corner of the room. And I played along. For now. But something had broken. A slow, quiet break. Like the sound of old wood splintering under pressure. It wasn't loud. But it was permanent. The confirmation didn't come with a bang. No dramatic confrontation. No screaming match in the middle of the night. It arrived on a Tuesday, wrapped in a crisp white envelope, dropped off by the mail carrier like any other piece of routine correspondence. I almost didn't notice it, buried between utility bills and some charity flyer, but something about the heavy cardstock and elegant calligraphy caught my eye. Mr. and Mrs. Hale, it read. I stood there, still in my shop apron, grease on my hands, staring at the return address printed in gold foil. The Linford Grand, Nashville's premier luxury experience. Nashville? Brianna had said she'd be in Detroit that weekend. Leadership forum, networking events. She even showed me a fake itinerary. Now that I think back on it, times, panels, the whole deal. She was good. Too good. I never expected a hotel to send a thank you card. Curious, I opened it. The card inside was heavy, textured, expensive. On the front was an embossed rendering of the hotel's signature suite. Inside, in tidy, delicate handwriting. Thank you for choosing the Linford Grand for your romantic getaway. We hope your stay in the Magnolia Suite created unforgettable memories. Come back soon, Mr. and Mrs. Hale. I froze. Romantic getaway? I turned the card over, and there it was, tucked in the flap, an old-school Polaroid-style print. One of those guest experience **TS hotels sometimes take for fun. It was them. Her and a man I didn't know, standing by the balcony windows, wine glasses in hand. His arm rested casually around her waist. Her face glowed, relaxed, unbothered, like she belonged there, like she hadn't spent the morning she left for Detroit, hugging me goodbye and promising to call. I just stood there in the doorway of my shop's back office, the photo in one hand, the envelope in the other. I didn't rage. I didn't cry. I didn't even sit down. I just let the truth roll over me, slow and sharp like winter wind. I walked to the drawer beneath my desk, the one where I kept old warranty slips and unused stamps, and placed the card inside. Then I slid it shut. That was it. I didn't confront her that night. I didn't mention the envelope when she came home humming and happy, talking about how productive the conference had been. She didn't even stumble when I asked how Detroit was. Cold, she said with a shrug, dropping her suitcase by the door. But energizing. I needed it. Liar. There was a strange calm that came with finally knowing. Like your brain stops fighting with your heart, and they both just go quiet. The worst part wasn't the betrayal. It was the clarity. The realization that I hadn't been crazy all these months. That every gut instinct, every suspicion I'd buried under trust and routine, had been justified. That night, she curled up beside me in bed and fell asleep like nothing had happened. I watched her breathe, counted every inhale like it might unlock something inside me. But all I felt was distance. She looked peaceful, which somehow made it worse. I lay awake until dawn. The next morning, I poured her coffee like always. She thanked me like always. Then she rushed out the door, heels clicking, scent trailing behind her like a fog. I watched her drive off from the front porch, mug in hand, heart weirdly steady. I didn't follow her. I didn't need to. I already knew. The next few days passed in a blur of normalcy. She texted about dinner. She reminded me to pick up paper towels. She sent me a reel of some dog doing yoga, followed by 3 laughing emojis. It was almost insulting how well she wore the mask. But I didn't reply. Not in the way I used to. I started paying more attention. Where her eyes wandered when we sat together. How often she checked her phone when she thought I wasn't looking. How her stories repeated themselves. Tiny cracks in the lies. By Thursday, I had decided. Not about revenge. Not about confrontation. Just about next steps. Quiet ones. I wasn't going to beg her to stay, or explode and demand an apology. I wasn't going to ask for an explanation that I already knew would be layered in performance. I was going to prepare. It started with finances. I went through every joint account, every shared credit line. I wasn't looking to trap her. I just needed to understand what would happen when the truth finally surfaced. I reviewed the prenup we'd signed years ago. Back then, she had called it ceremonial, a formality. She'd laughed when we signed it at my lawyer's office, teasing me for being old-fashioned. Thank God for that piece of paper. I checked the deed to the house. Still in the name of the trust I'd created before our marriage. Good. The cars? Leased under my business. Her name wasn't on anything that mattered. I was secure. And for the first time in weeks, I felt something close to power. Not over her. Over myself. I started sleeping in the guest room. Claimed I was snoring too much. She didn't push back. Probably relieved. I think part of her believed she'd softened me so much over the years that I'd never make a move. That if she was quiet enough, careful enough, she could live in both worlds. She didn't realize I'd already left. Not physically. Not yet. But something inside me had packed its bags. And the photo in that drawer was all the permission I needed. The morning after I closed the drawer on that card, the photo, the evidence, I didn't make a dramatic announcement or change my daily routine. I rose with the sun, brewed my coffee, opened the windows, and sat at the kitchen table like always. Brianna had already left for early meetings, which had become her new normal. Suited me fine. I needed the silence. What most people didn't know, what Brianna never bothered to dig deep enough to discover, was that I wasn't just a bicycle repairman. That shop she liked to call my hobby business, that was the shell, the storefront, the origin, but not the legacy. Years ago, while Brianna was chasing a string of short-lived startups and trendy consulting gigs, I had been quietly building something else. A network of co-working spaces, starting with the second floor above the bike shop. I called it a test run. Some freelancers in the area needed cheap desk space. I gave them Wi-Fi and free coffee. Then I expanded, leased more buildings, partnered with real estate developers, brought in interior designers, built a brand discreetly, registered the business under a holding company, reinvented myself under a name that never touched our shared life. The bicycle shop was my mask. A good one, comfortable, believable, and now it gave me cover. That morning I didn't open the shop. Instead, I dressed in a navy button-down and drove 2 hours east to the headquarters I had rarely visited in person. Not because I wasn't proud, just because I liked the quiet, the distance. I wanted it separate from the life I lived with Brianna. She'd met a few colleagues once, years ago, at a company picnic. She thought I was doing IT work. I let her believe it. As I walked into the building, 10 stories of glass and steel with my vision stamped on every wall, I was greeted with warm smiles and subtle surprise. "Mr. Hale?" the receptionist asked, eyes wide. "We weren't expecting you." "I like surprises," I said, and meant it. I rode the elevator to the top floor. The leadership suite had been redesigned recently. Open concept, Scandinavian wood, modern fixtures. Too sleek, maybe. Too comfortable. That was the first problem. Comfort makes people sloppy. I called a meeting with the board, every regional director, division lead, and executive assistant. No warning. No slides. I walked into the room, scanned their faces, and said, "This is not a courtesy visit." They shifted in their seats. Some looked nervous. Others confused. A few cocky. I built this company to give people space to build something real. Something better. And I've been watching. From a distance. Now I'm done watching. I pulled a manila folder from my satchel and laid it on the table. Inside was a compiled audit, months of discrepancies, delayed reports, contract manipulations, and, worse, whispers of toxic behavior at the mid-management level. My legal team had compiled it all. Quietly, thoroughly. "You've got an hour," I said, "to explain why these names shouldn't be on a termination list." That's when they understood. The founder wasn't a passive figurehead. I'd just been quiet, not blind. By noon, I had fired 6 people. Not with malice, just precision. 2 VPs walked out with tears in their eyes. Another tried to argue. I didn't argue back. I simply handed him a printed clause from his contract and offered a box for his things. I replaced them with people I trusted. Not people with the best resumes, people with grit. People who understood how to build from nothing. I offered promotions to folks who never expected them. Watched tears form in the eyes of a receptionist who had been overlooked for years. By the time I walked out, the air felt different. Lighter. Focused. No one smiled at me, but they nodded. Respect. Maybe fear. I didn't care which. It meant they were paying attention. I stopped by the HR office on my way out. I asked them to update my profile across all internal systems to reflect my actual role. Founder. CEO. Visionary. No more hiding. The elevator ride down was silent. I caught my reflection in the polished steel walls. Same face. Same hands. But something had shifted. Not just in the office. In me. For years, I had played the role of the humble husband. The man behind the curtain. The support system. The reliable one. I let Brianna think she outgrew me. I let her believe she was the center of the world we shared. That I was lucky to have her. But now I saw it clearly. She had underestimated me. Because I let her. I drove home before sunset, the dashboard clock ticking like a metronome. I wasn't angry. Not anymore. Anger takes energy. I was done bleeding for someone who saw me as a background character. When I walked in, the house was quiet. She was upstairs, I assumed, on a Zoom call or texting Chris. I didn't check. I went straight to the living room, poured a glass of bourbon, and sat by the window. I watched the sky shift colors. Tennessee dusk. My favorite kind of stillness. She came down an hour later, heels in hand, makeup pristine. "Hey," she said, walking past me to the kitchen. "Long day." "Productive," I replied. She nodded, distracted. "Dinner later? I'm supposed to meet up with some folks, but we could do something quick." "No rush," I said. She didn't hear me. She was already scrolling through her phone. Later that night, while she slept, I walked through the house, room by room, not looking for clues or evidence, just remembering the life we'd built, the dinners, the holidays, the jokes that once made us double over with laughter, the couch where we watched movies in sweatpants, the bed where we once made plans at midnight dreaming like kids. It was all still here, the furniture, the memories, but the heart was gone. In the hallway outside our bedroom, I stood for a long time, staring at a framed photo of us at a vineyard. Her leaning into me, eyes bright, wine glass in hand. We looked happy. Maybe we were. But happiness built on secrecy is just delay. I took the photo down, placed it face down on the hall table and turned off the light. I wasn't going to burn our life down. I didn't need to. I had already moved on in the way that matters most. I had nothing left to prove. And she had no idea how far ahead I was. Our 12th wedding anniversary fell on a Friday. There was no celebration planned. No trip. No flowers ordered in advance. Brianna hadn't brought it up all week, and I hadn't reminded her. The silence between us had stretched into something that looked like routine. We weren't fighting. We weren't apologizing. We were simply coexisting. I woke up before dawn and went for a walk. The air was cool, damp from overnight rain. The neighborhood was still asleep, only the sound of sprinklers ticking on and birds starting their morning debates. I thought about our first anniversary. We'd gone camping in the Smokies. She hated every second of it. Mosquitoes, no Wi-Fi, a bear near our tent. But she laughed the whole time. Or maybe I only remember the laughter. Either way, it had felt real. By the time I got back home, Brianna was already dressed. She wore a crisp white blouse and a pencil skirt, her armor. Her back was turned to me at the sink, rinsing her coffee mug. She glanced over her shoulder and offered a smile. "Morning." "Morning," I echoed. She didn't say anything else. No happy anniversary. No hint of sentiment. At 7:42 a.m. she left the house with her phone in hand and her ring still sitting on the nightstand. I didn't remind her. I didn't even look up from my toast. I spent the day finalizing details with my legal team. My lawyers had drawn up the divorce papers weeks ago, airtight, straightforward, unforgiving. Everything was clean, division of property, none, alimony, zero, shared assets, non-existent. The prenup she'd called symbolic now had the weight of a wrecking ball. The house belonged to the trust. The cars were leased through my company. Every financial thread had been tied to me and me alone. She didn't know it yet, but her exit would be swift, surgical, and irreversible. At 5 p.m., I got the text. "Dinner tonight?" I made reservations. "Thought we should talk." I didn't reply. Instead, I changed into a dark gray suit, the kind I hadn't worn in years, sharp, understated. I tied a navy blue tie, adjusted the cufflinks she gave me on our 5th anniversary, and arrived at the restaurant exactly on time. She was already seated when I walked in, corner booth, candle flickering between us, half a glass of wine already gone. She looked nervous. Not panicked, but uncertain. Like someone who'd realized the ice beneath them was thinner than they thought. "Hi," she said as I slid into the seat across from her. "You look good." "So do you." We sat in silence for a moment. Then she reached into her purse and pulled out a manila envelope. It wasn't thick. No bulging paperwork. Just a few neatly signed pages. She slid it across the table. "I figured this was coming," she said. "No use dragging it out." I didn't respond right away. I took a sip of the wine, let it linger. "You signed everything?" I asked. "Yes." She nodded, not looking me in the eye. "I'm not going to fight you on this. It's done." She didn't apologize. She didn't explain. I respected her for that, finally sparing me another performance. I opened the envelope and scanned the signature. Her name, written in the same confident, looping script she'd used when we bought our first car together. That name had once meant permanence. Now it felt like a guest overstaying their welcome. I pulled out a pen, signed my name beneath hers, and placed the papers back inside the envelope. Then I handed it to the waiter without a word. "Can you make sure this gets into an envelope?" I asked him. "It's going to a law office downtown." He blinked. Sure. Right away." Brianna watched me, stunned. "You brought a courier?" "I brought closure," I said, leaning back. The waiter disappeared. She tried to smile, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "I didn't expect you to be so calm," she said. "I've had time." Another silence fell. I picked up the menu, ordered my usual filet mignon, medium rare, truffle fries, a glass of Tempranillo. She didn't order anything else. Just sipped what remained of her wine and picked at a salad that hadn't been touched. When the food arrived, I ate slowly. Purposefully. Every bite was deliberate, seasoned with the knowledge that this meal wasn't a goodbye dinner. It was a conclusion. When I finished, I folded my napkin, placed it on the table, and stood. "Are you going to say anything?" she asked, finally breaking. "What do you want me to say?" "I don't know," she said, her voice cracking. "That you still care? That this wasn't all for nothing?" I stared at her for a long moment. The woman I'd built a life around. The woman who, somewhere along the way, stopped seeing me as a partner and started seeing me as a placeholder. Everything you needed to hear, I said, was in what I didn't say. She blinked, eyes glistening. And what was that? That I'm free. I turned and walked away, past the host stand, out onto the street where my driver waited in a black sedan. As the car pulled away, I didn't look back. I didn't check my phone. I didn't even exhale. I was done with explanations. Done with doubts. I didn't need to reclaim anything. Because I never lost myself. She did. And now all she had left was a candle burning at a table meant for two. The fallout began less than 72 hours after dinner. Brianna received the first envelope on a Monday morning, a notice from my legal team that the divorce had been filed and finalized. She didn't reply. By Wednesday, the rest arrived. The second envelope confirmed the transfer of assets, none. The third detailed the revocation of her credit privileges, car lease, and access to the joint account, which hadn't really been joint in a long time. She had once laughed off the prenup. "We're never getting divorced," she'd said, waving it off like a parking ticket. "It's just symbolic." Turns out it was surgical. The house? Held by a generational trust in my name, never legally hers. The cars? Leased through the company I controlled. The accounts? Redirected the moment the papers were signed. She wasn't entitled to half. She wasn't entitled to anything. I didn't do it to punish her. I did it to protect myself. She'd bet on an illusion, a man she thought would be too soft, too simple to see the truth. But I had seen it. I'd lived it. And when it was time to act, I did so with the precision she never expected. When the letters stopped, silence followed. She didn't call. She didn't text. There was nothing left to argue. What could she say? There was no betrayal in my actions, only clarity. I didn't shout. I didn't humiliate. I just ended it. She left the house the following week with 3 suitcases, a folded comforter, and a carry-on bag full of cosmetics. No goodbye. No tears. Just a stunned quiet, like someone waking up from a dream and realizing they were never the main character. 6 months later, I stood in the lobby of our newest co-working flagship in Portland. Glass walls, reclaimed wood, indoor garden, a wellness library, a meditation pod. It was everything I had envisioned years ago when I started above the bike shop. Now it was real. And it was mine. I had moved to Portland for the launch. Fresh air. Fewer ghosts. I lived in a sleek apartment overlooking the river, walked to work most days, drank coffee from a corner shop where no one knew my story. I was dating someone new, Lauren, a veterinarian I met when my neighbor's dog broke loose. She was grounded. Kind. She didn't care about what I owned or what I built. She asked me questions about books, music, my family. She never once asked about Brianna. And I never brought her up. One crisp afternoon, I stepped outside the office for a meeting and saw her. Brianna. She stood across the street, clutching a manila envelope like it was armor. Her hair was longer, curled differently. Her clothes were simpler, more practical. She looked smaller. Not thinner, just less sharp, like the edges had been sanded down by time and consequence. I didn't stop walking. She took one step forward, raised the envelope slightly. I passed her without slowing. No eye contact. No hesitation. She'd had her chance to speak. I'd given her 12 years. 100 mornings. 1,000 opportunities. Now, there was nothing left to say. I was no longer a man waiting for answers. I was a man who had built his life back, piece by deliberate piece, and discovered that peace wasn't found in closure, it was found in never needing it.